On a warm summer night in Pennsylvania, a small group of tourists walked the silent fields of Gettysburg. They had come not for history this time, but for the legends, those whispered stories of ghosts that seemed to cling to every rock, every barn, every blade of grass. As the last light of dusk gave way to the first breath of night, the air grew heavy, thick with something unexplainable. Suddenly, one woman froze. Ahead, through the haze of the lingering mist, figures began to move. Soldiers, dozens of them, trudging across the field in tattered Union uniforms. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, their boots silent against the earth that should have crunched beneath them. And just as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished into the night, leaving only the stunned silence of those who swore they had seen men long dead march once more. Were these tricks of the imagination, born from the terrible history of this ground? Or were these soldiers still here, reliving their final march on the bloodiest battlefield of the American Civil War? Before we uncover more, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more chilling history. Gettysburg is not just a place of memory, it is a place of echoes, echoes of pain, of sacrifice, of a nation tearing itself apart. Over 3 long days in July 1863, more than 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or went missing in action during the Battle of Gettysburg. In those 3 days, these quiet fields became rivers of blood. Men fought desperately, charging into cannon fire, stumbling over the bodies of the fallen, bayonets fixed, eyes filled with fury or fear. The cries of the dying mixed with the smoke of black powder until the very air seemed to burn. When it was over, the landscape was unrecognizable. Farmhouses had become field hospitals, their floors slick with blood. Barns overflowed with the wounded. Dead men and dying men lay together in the sun. Horses, thousands of them, rotted where they had fallen. The stench of death lingered for weeks, seeping into the soil. It is said that even now, on hot summer days, the smell of decay rises again, as if the battlefield itself remembers. Perhaps this is why Gettysburg has earned its reputation as the most haunted ground in America. It is not only the sheer number of dead, though that alone is staggering. It is the violence of their passing. They died in agony, many far from home, their bodies never claimed by family. For countless soldiers, this battlefield became their grave, their names lost to time, their stories unfinished. And in places where lives end violently, where grief and terror are concentrated in every stone, the supernatural often follows. Visitors to Gettysburg have long reported strange encounters. Some speak of phantom gunfire in the night, the sharp crack of musket fire, followed by the distant boom of cannons that no longer exist. Others tell of shadowy figures standing silently on the ridges, or spectral horsemen galloping across the open fields before fading into the darkness. At times, even modern technology seems to bend under the weight of the past. Cameras malfunction, recordings capture ghostly voices, and electronic devices drain of power without explanation. Among the most famous stories is that of the so-called Phantom Regiment. Multiple visitors, at different times and without connection to one another, have claimed to see entire groups of soldiers, not just 1 or 2, but entire units moving in formation. These men appear solid, real, dressed in the blue of the Union or the gray of the Confederacy, muskets at the ready. Yet when approached, they dissolve into the mist, leaving behind only the stunned disbelief of those who witnessed them. The Devil's Den is perhaps the most infamous sight of all. This rocky outcropping, with its jagged boulders and twisted terrain, became a place of chaos during the battle. Confederate sharpshooters hid among the stones, firing down on Union soldiers, who in turn charged the rocks with desperate fury. The ground there ran red with blood. Even today, visitors report hearing whispers among the stones, feeling unseen hands tugging at their clothing, or capturing ghostly figures in photographs. Some even claim to have been approached by a barefoot man in ragged clothing, who cheerfully offers to take their picture, only for him to vanish before their eyes. But the hauntings are not confined to the battlefield alone. The town of Gettysburg itself, once overwhelmed by the tide of battle, is said to remain haunted. Homes that served as makeshift hospitals still echo with phantom cries of pain. The Jennie Wade house, where the only civilian killed during the battle met her fate, is said to host her restless spirit still. And the cemeteries, where the dead were eventually laid to rest, carry an aura so heavy that even those who do not believe in ghosts often admit to feeling something. Why does Gettysburg continue to produce such stories? Some believe it is the sheer weight of death, the psychic imprint of so many lives cut short. Others think it is the deep emotional wound carved into the land itself, one that never fully healed. Skeptics suggest it is imagination, collective memory, or the power of suggestion. But even skeptics sometimes falter in the face of certain experiences. After all, how does one explain voices caught on tape when no one was present? Or the cold touch of a hand in the dark when you are alone? The battlefield becomes especially eerie at night. As the sun sets, the tourist crowds thin, and silence falls across the fields. The monuments, hundreds of them, stand as pale sentinels under the moonlight. The trees sway in the evening breeze. And sometimes, when the night is still, a faint drumbeat is said to echo through the hills, the steady rhythm of a long-dead drummer boy who refuses to stop marching. For those who visit Gettysburg, the experience can be transformative. It is not just a lesson in history, but a confrontation with the past made present. Walking those fields, one cannot help but imagine the horror that unfolded there. The thunder of cannons, the cries of men, the sudden silence after a charge. And when the air grows heavy, when the mist begins to rise, when shapes begin to stir in the darkness. Some say the past does more than linger. It returns. And so, Gettysburg remains a place of reverence and of fear. A battlefield turned cemetery, a cemetery turned shrine, a shrine turned haunted ground. Every stone, every tree, every farmhouse carries a story. Some are recorded in books, others are whispered in the shadows, but all of them remind us of the price paid here and of the spirits that may still walk beneath the stars. What really lies behind the countless reports of soldiers marching in the night, of phantom cannons thundering across empty fields, of voices whispering in the dark? Are they the restless dead, forever bound to the soil where they fell? Or are they echoes, impressions of a tragedy so vast that it etched itself permanently into the world? One thing is certain. When you stand in Gettysburg at night, and the mist rises, and the silence deepens, it is hard to shake the feeling that you are not alone. But if the battlefield itself is haunted, what of the places where the wounded were carried? What of the barns, the homes, the cellars where men clung to life or cried out in their final moments? If the fields are haunted by soldiers, then surely the hospitals are haunted by the dying. And indeed, the stories from those places may be even darker. If the battlefield of Gettysburg is haunted by the restless spirits of soldiers, then the homes and barns that became hospitals are haunted by something more intimate, the cries of the wounded and the whispers of those who lingered between life and death. When the fighting ended in July of 1863, the town of Gettysburg was overwhelmed. A community of just over 2,000 residents suddenly found itself responsible for tens of thousands of wounded men. Every available space was converted into a hospital. Churches filled with rows of bleeding soldiers. Barns overflowed with men begging for water. Even family homes became places of suffering. Ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, farmers, young women, were thrust into the role of nurses, doctors, and morticians. One such home was the George Spangler Farm, which became one of the largest field hospitals of the battle. Here, more than 1,800 men were treated, many of them Confederate soldiers. Amputations were constant. Surgeons worked around the clock, their saws biting through bone, their buckets filling with limbs. Outside, piles of amputated arms and legs reached almost as high as the windows. The cries of men echoing across the fields at night were said to chill even the most hardened soul. Today, visitors to the farm report hearing those same cries drifting on the wind. Some have described seeing shadowy figures limping between the barns. Others feel sudden cold spots, as if unseen hands brush against them while they walk. The Schmucker house, once the home of a Lutheran seminary professor, also became a field hospital. Inside, the floors were soaked with blood, and the screams of the dying echoed against the plaster walls. Witnesses today say that those echoes have not faded. People who tour the house speak of disembodied voices, footsteps pacing where no one stands, and a sense of unbearable sadness pressing down on every visitor. The scent of iron, sharp and metallic, is sometimes reported in rooms where countless men bled to death. Perhaps no home is more infamous than the Jennie Wade house. Jennie Wade was the only civilian killed during the battle, struck down by a stray bullet while baking bread for Union soldiers. She was just 20 years old. The bullet tore through 2 doors before finding her, killing her instantly. The tragedy of her death has become one of Gettysburg's most enduring stories. Many who visit the home report a strange heaviness in the kitchen where Jennie fell. Others claim to see the apparition of a young woman moving about the rooms, sometimes holding a tray of bread, sometimes simply standing silently at the window. Her restless presence seems to linger, as if she still wishes to care for the soldiers who never came home. The Farnsworth House Inn offers another glimpse into Gettysburg's haunted past. During the battle, Confederate sharpshooters used its attic as a nest, firing down on Union troops. Later, the home was converted into a makeshift hospital, where blood soaked deep into the wooden floors. Today, guests who stay at the inn report waking to the sensation of unseen hands pulling at their blankets. Doors open and close on their own. Phantom footsteps creak on the staircases. Some guests even describe seeing a young boy's ghost wandering the halls, perhaps the spirit of a child lost in the chaos of war. Then there is the Daniel Lady Farm, used as a Confederate field hospital during the battle. Bloodstains still mark the floorboards where surgeries were performed. It is said that the cries of Confederate soldiers echo there even now, their suffering etched permanently into the house. Paranormal investigators claim to have recorded voices in the farmhouse, men with southern accents crying out for help, calling for mothers, whispering prayers. In the barn, apparitions of soldiers have been seen lying on the ground, their forms fading in and out as if caught between this world and the next. The Gettysburg Orphanage, or National Soldiers' Orphans Homestead, adds another layer of darkness. After the war, it was established to care for the children of fallen Union soldiers. At first, it was a place of refuge, but over time it fell into cruelty. A matron named Rosa Carmichael was accused of abusing the children, locking them in a dark cellar, beating them, chaining them to walls. Even after the orphanage closed, stories of cruelty lingered. Visitors today report hearing the cries of children in the basement. Some have felt tiny hands clutching at their clothing in the dark. Others claim to see the shadow of a stern woman with a whip in hand, stalking the halls where children once trembled. The town itself still bears scars of battle. The Dobbin House Tavern, one of the oldest structures in Gettysburg, was used as a hospital and hiding place during the war. Patrons today sometimes hear whispers in empty rooms, or feel as if they are being watched while dining. The air grows suddenly cold. Glasses tremble on tables, and waitstaff tell stories of phantom figures passing through closed doors. These places are not merely old homes and inns. They are sites of trauma, where life and death intertwined in a way that seems to have left a permanent mark. When people walk through them today, they often report the same sensations: chills, pressure in the chest, a sense of being observed. The ghosts of Gettysburg are not confined to the battlefield. They are in the walls, in the floors, in the very foundations of the town. And the stories continue into the modern day. Tour guides speak of tourists fainting in the Jennie Wade house for no medical reason, collapsing suddenly as if struck by an unseen force. Paranormal investigators at the Daniel Lady Farm have recorded knocks that respond to questions, as if the dead are still listening. Guests at the Farnsworth house have woken to find shadowy figures standing at the foot of their beds, watching in silence. Why do these spirits remain? Some say it is unfinished business, that soldiers, nurses, and even children cling to the world they once knew, unable to move on. Others suggest that the trauma of Gettysburg created something like a wound in time, one that bleeds into the present. Perhaps the sheer weight of grief and suffering was enough to trap echoes of the past here forever. But there is another theory, one that chills even seasoned ghost hunters. Some believe that the spirits of Gettysburg are not simply memories or echoes, but active presences, aware of the living, capable of interaction. If true, then every visitor who walks these streets does not just walk among history, they walk among the dead. As night falls over the town, the line between past and present seems to blur. Lamps glow faintly in the windows, and shadows move where no one should be. The faint sound of music sometimes drifts from the orphanage, though it has been silent for more than a century. A woman's voice hums softly in the Jennie Wade house, though no one is there. And in the barns and fields, whispers rise on the wind, too faint to understand but impossible to ignore. The town of Gettysburg is more than a museum. It is a living memorial, where every corner tells a story, and every shadow hides a secret. The battlefield may hold the soldiers, but the town holds the aftermath, the suffering, the fear, the grief of a community overwhelmed by war. And perhaps that grief still lingers, just as strongly as the echoes of battle. But if Gettysburg's homes and hospitals are haunted by sorrow, the battlefield itself hides something darker still. There are places where the veil seems thinnest, where the dead do not merely whisper, but reveal themselves fully. Among them, none is more infamous than a rocky outcropping that has earned its name in legend and in fear, the Devil's Den. If Gettysburg's homes and hospitals whisper with sorrow, the battlefield itself screams with violence. There are places where the land seems forever stained by blood, where the air grows heavy and shadows linger longer than they should. Among these, none is more infamous than the Devil's Den. The Devil's Den is a jumbled mass of granite boulders at the southern end of the battlefield, a place where chaos reigned during the second day of fighting. Confederate sharpshooters used the rocks as cover, firing down upon Union troops advancing up Little Round Top. Union soldiers charged the outcropping again and again, fighting hand-to-hand among the stones. The ground ran slick with blood. Men fell screaming into the gaps between the rocks, their bodies piling where they landed. By the end of the day, the Devil's Den was littered with corpses, so many that soldiers said the rocks themselves seemed to weep. Perhaps it was the violence of that moment that left its mark, or perhaps something darker always lingered there. Even before the battle, local farmers whispered of strange happenings around the rocks. They claimed that the Devil's Den was cursed, a place of ill fortune where livestock sickened, crops failed, and hunters saw strange lights at night. Some even believed the rocks were home to demons, hence the name. After the war, the legends only grew. Visitors to the Devil's Den reported feeling watched, as though unseen eyes studied them from the shadows. Photographs taken there often came out distorted, with strange blurs or unexplained figures appearing among the rocks. Some told of hearing phantom gunfire, the sharp crack of rifles echoing long after the last battle ended. Others described sudden cold winds sweeping through the rocks, chilling them to the bone even on the hottest summer days. One of the most enduring stories is that of the phantom photographer. Tourists have claimed for decades that while visiting the Devil's Den, they were approached by a strange man, barefoot and disheveled, who offered to take their photograph. He seemed real, solid, even cheerful, until he vanished without a trace. Witnesses describe him as wearing ragged clothes, his face sunburned, his feet bare. Some believe he is the ghost of a Confederate soldier who once used the rocks as his hiding place, still wandering among the boulders, still reaching out to the living. But the Devil's Den is not the only haunted spot on the battlefield. Just above it rises Little Round Top, one of the most critical positions of the battle. On July 2, 1863, Union forces rushed to defend the hill, knowing that if it fell, the entire Union line might collapse. Waves of Confederate soldiers charged up the slope, only to be met by desperate Union defenders. The fighting was fierce, with bayonets clashing and muskets firing at near point-blank range. The Union held the hill, but at terrible cost. Today, Little Round Top is a quiet place, marked by monuments and covered in trees, but visitors often report strange occurrences there. Some hear the sound of drums or distant bugle calls. Others have seen figures moving in the trees, soldiers in blue uniforms who vanish when approached. One woman visiting the site claimed she was approached by a man in full Union dress who insisted she was standing in the line of fire. He directed her to move, and when she turned back to thank him, he was gone. The triangular field, a small patch of land near the Devil's Den, has also earned a reputation for hauntings. The field saw brutal fighting, and Confederate soldiers used it as a staging ground for their attacks. Today, it is considered one of the most paranormally active places in Gettysburg. Paranormal investigators report high readings of electromagnetic energy there, as if the ground itself hums with unseen power. Visitors describe cameras malfunctioning, batteries draining instantly, and sudden feelings of dread. Some have even captured ghostly figures in photographs, soldiers standing silently in the mist before fading away. At the wheat field, another site of slaughter, the earth was so drenched with blood that survivors said you could not step without treading on the dead or dying. Over 4,000 men were killed or wounded in just a few hours of fighting. Even today, the wheat field is said to echo with the cries of battle. People walking through the fields at night claim to hear voices whispering, the clash of steel, or the faint sound of boots marching in unison. Some have even felt hands grab their arms or shoulders, only to turn and find no one there. Culp's Hill to the north adds to the ghostly tapestry. There, Union soldiers held strong against repeated Confederate assaults. The hill's wooded slopes became a killing ground, and the bodies piled so thick that soldiers described the earth as a carpet of the dead. Today, the hill is quiet, but some say too quiet. Visitors report hearing phantom musket fire, or voices shouting commands in the darkness. Others describe an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the woods themselves are still alive with memories of the fallen. Then there is Pickett's charge, the infamous climax of the battle. On July 3, 1863, thousands of Confederate soldiers marched across open ground toward the Union lines in what became one of the most disastrous assaults of the war. The Confederates were mowed down by artillery and rifle fire, their ranks shattered before they could even reach the Union wall. Survivors later spoke of the field as a place of horror, littered with the bodies of comrades, the cries of the wounded ringing in their ears. Today, the field appears peaceful, but many who walk it claim to hear the echo of cannon fire or the rhythmic tramp of boots marching into certain death. The entire battlefield is like a vast open-air cemetery. There is no spot that was untouched by death. And it is this very saturation of tragedy that many believe fuels the hauntings. Paranormal investigators who visit Gettysburg often say it is unlike any other location they've studied. Ghostly activity is not confined to one building or one field. It is everywhere. Voices are heard in the open air. Shadows move in the distance, and people walking alone suddenly feel surrounded. Skeptics argue that it is the power of suggestion, that visitors come expecting to feel something and convince themselves they have. And yet, even skeptics sometimes falter. A man who visited Little Round Top late one evening insisted he saw a group of Union soldiers, muskets at the ready, standing watch in the trees. He assumed they were reenactors, until he realized it was well after midnight, and the figures silently vanished before his eyes. Gettysburg has been called a thin place, where the veil between the living and the dead wears thin. And perhaps it is. With so much blood spilled, so much suffering endured, it may be that the land itself holds the memory, replaying it again and again. Whether these are spirits of the dead or imprints of history, the effect is the same. A place where the past is not past at all, but still unfolding in the shadows. And yet, for all the haunted fields and rocky dens, the story does not end with ghostly soldiers or phantom gunfire. For there are places in Gettysburg where the veil seems to tear completely, where visitors do not just see or hear the past, but come face to face with it. Places where the line between history and haunting vanishes altogether. If the battlefields of Gettysburg are stained with restless echoes, the Soldiers' National Cemetery is the heart of its sorrow. Here, thousands of men, Union and Confederate alike, were buried after the terrible fighting. The cemetery is a place of honor, a place of memory, but it is also said to be one of the most haunted grounds in all of America. For the dead may rest beneath the soil, but their spirits have never left. It was on this very ground, in November of 1863, that President Abraham Lincoln delivered his most enduring words, the Gettysburg Address. Before a crowd of thousands, Lincoln spoke of sacrifice, of unity, and of a new birth of freedom. His words were brief, but they carried the weight of the war and the bloodshed that stained the land. Many say the air was heavy that day, as if the dead themselves leaned close to listen. And perhaps they still do. Visitors to the cemetery often describe an almost unbearable heaviness, a weight pressing on the chest that feels like grief made solid. Some have reported hearing phantom weeping among the gravestones, low and mournful, as if mothers still grieve for sons who never returned. Others tell of footsteps crunching on gravel paths when no one is near, or the faint sound of voices murmuring in prayer. A few have claimed to see figures in faded uniforms standing silently by headstones, their faces shadowed, their forms dissolving into mist when approached. There are even those who insist that Lincoln himself returns. At night, in the quietest hours, some have seen a tall, thin figure walking slowly among the graves, his head bowed in sorrow. His long black coat flutters faintly in the night air, though no wind stirs. Skeptics dismiss it as imagination, but too many stories repeat the same details. A lantern-like glow around him, the unmistakable silhouette of a man burdened by history. Perhaps the president who gave voice to the fallen still feels bound to the place where he promised their sacrifice would not be in vain. But Lincoln is not the only spirit said to wander Gettysburg. The cemetery is filled with reports of phantom soldiers, their presence felt more than seen. Tourists have described sudden chills, as if someone brushed past them. Paranormal investigators have captured strange recordings, EVPs or electronic voice phenomena, where ghostly voices whisper names or murmur words like home or mother. Some even hear fragments of commands, forward or hold the line, echoes of orders shouted more than a century and a half ago. One of the most chilling encounters occurred when a group of students on a field trip walked through the cemetery at dusk. They heard footsteps approaching from behind and turned to see a man in full Union dress, carrying a rifle. He looked directly at them, nodded once, and then vanished into thin air. The students screamed, but later, when shown old photographs of Union uniforms, they swore it was exactly what the man had been wearing. Beyond the cemetery lies the town itself, and here too the spirits are said to linger. In homes converted into hospitals during the battle, blood once stained the floors and the cries of the wounded rang through the night. At the Farnsworth House Inn, which sheltered Confederate sharpshooters during the battle, guests today report hearing heavy boots marching across the attic or the sound of a rifle being fired from the windows. In the basement, where soldiers once died of their wounds, people have felt icy hands brush against their arms or seen shadows crawling along the walls. The Jennie Wade house, where the only civilian casualty of the battle was killed, is also a place of restless energy. Jennie Wade was baking bread when a stray bullet tore through the door and struck her, ending her life instantly. Today, visitors claim to hear her voice, a young woman humming softly, or smell the scent of fresh bread baking where no oven burns. Some have even seen her figure in the kitchen, busy at her work, only to dissolve into nothing when approached. These hauntings are not violent, not malicious, but they are deeply sorrowful. It is as if the spirits of Gettysburg are not trying to frighten the living, but simply to be remembered. Their pain, their sacrifice, their longing for home, all of it lingers in the air, in the soil, in the very stones of the town. What makes Gettysburg unique among haunted places is the sheer scale of its tragedy. More than 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing after just 3 days of fighting. The town was overwhelmed with bodies. Farmers' fields became mass graves. Homes became hospitals where men begged for water or for one last letter to be sent to loved ones. The trauma was so immense, so concentrated, that many believed the very fabric of reality was scarred. The veil between the living and the dead was torn, and it has never fully healed. Paranormal investigators often speak of Gettysburg as a living haunting. Unlike other places where spirits appear occasionally, Gettysburg seems to exist in a constant state of activity. Ghostly figures are seen in broad daylight. Cannon fire and drumbeats echo across the fields when no reenactments are scheduled. Tourists capture photographs of soldiers standing at attention, unaware they are standing in the middle of a modern road. It is as if the battle never truly ended, only replaying itself endlessly in the fog of memory. Some even believe Gettysburg is not haunted by individual spirits, but by something greater, an imprint of trauma itself. This theory, called the stone tape theory, suggests that places of intense emotion, especially violence and death, can record those moments like a film, replaying them for those sensitive enough to perceive them. In this way, Gettysburg becomes not just a battlefield but a living record of suffering, a place where time folds back on itself. And yet, there are moments of peace too. Some visitors walking the cemetery at night have heard soft singing, like a hymn carried on the breeze. Others claim to see not just soldiers, but women in long dresses moving among the graves, perhaps the spirits of nurses who cared for the dying. These apparitions do not terrify but comfort, as though the dead are still tended, still remembered, even in the afterlife. Gettysburg is a paradox, a place of horror and history, of sorrow and memory. For some, it is a reminder of sacrifice and unity. For others, it is proof that the dead still walk among us. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. When night falls over Gettysburg and the mists rise across the fields, the line between the living and the dead grows very, very thin. So if you find yourself walking there alone in the quiet of dusk, listen carefully. For the echoes of muskets may still crack across the hills. The faint rhythm of drums may carry on the wind. And perhaps, if you are very unlucky or very chosen, you may find yourself face to face with a soldier who died long ago, still fighting a battle that never ended.